Deadlock isn't useless. As I make this video, VALORANT is currently running in patch 7.04, and no changes have been made to Deadlock so far from her release into the game. However, even after the patch notes, Deadlock has seen no action during the current VCT Champions 2023. Not a single team picked Deadlock throughout the entire 2 weeks of the competitive scene, and Riot has done nothing to buff her or tweak her abilities and utility, which doesn't make any sense. You see, on paper, Deadlock sounds like a pretty solid agent. You've got a net that pins people down, a sensor that stuns any enemies making noise, and a wall that is a literal bullet sponge, alongside a cocoon of death that is her ultimate. This all sounds great on paper, but in practice, it just doesn't work. Or does it? You see, there are two sides to this debate of whether she's even viable or not, but let's start from why she wouldn't be viable in the first place. Starting from her first ability, her GravNet is entirely situational on both defense and offense, and half of the time, it isn't going to work due to how useless it is. So what if you caught the enemy in the net? They're just in a crouch position with their movement hindered, and that doesn't stop them from putting a bullet in your face. Her sonic sensors are debatable at best as to how useful it actually is, as opposed to Killjoy's alarm bot and turret, or Cypher's tripwires, since all you have to do to get past Deadlock's sensors is just shift walk, which you probably are already doing if you're flanking the enemy. This results in having the need for one person to watch flank. On defense, it usually isn't a problem, but on offense, that's automatically making the fight a 4v5. As for her wall, it is also debatable as to how useful it is compared to Sage's wall, since it's transparent and can be shot through, not to mention how it can be destroyed right after being deployed for a while, again, just like a Sage wall. As for her ultimate, it's probably the only thing in her kit that doesn't really have any problems. Moving on to how she would be viable in terms of how she currently is now, as previously mentioned, the GravNet on its own is pretty much useless. But if you paired it up with other agents' abilities, like Raze or Chaos Grenade, it could wipe out multiple enemies with great effect, given that they are there at the right place, right time. Like I mentioned, her net is entirely situational. As for her sonic sensors, they really only work if you were to place them down somewhere where the enemy is meant to be loud. For example, on Ascent, placing the sensors down anywhere in mid, where they can just shift walk past it, would be a terrible idea compared to putting it near the entrance of B main, somewhere the attackers are meant to go fast or have no option to play it slow. Onto her wall, it's really dependent on whether you can put it up in time and get it in a good place, and at times, you may or may not need a smoke to go along with it if you want to both obstruct their vision and entry. The strong thing I'd say about her entire kit is her ult. Her ult is extremely strong in 1v1 situations and forces the enemy to play together against Deadlock. Everything I mentioned previously all have one thing in common for Deadlock, is that she is almost entirely situational. It's as if her utility is meant to react to sudden movements, but is held back by Deadlock's capacity as an agent. If we compare it to an agent like Astra on the other hand, her ability to react to situations is great due to how she's able to place stars everywhere on the map while she's anywhere. An agent suited to react to anything, at any time, anywhere. Unfortunately for Deadlock, she doesn't have the astral powers that Astra has to help her, resulting in her having to predict half the time what is going to happen and how it's going to happen, which normally isn't a problem for a Sentinel because that's what they do half the time, right? You'd be right if you were thinking that way, except for the fact that Deadlock cannot retrieve and redeploy her sonic sensors. You see, agents like Killjoy, Cypher, and Chamber all can retrieve their utility and redeploy them, but Deadlock can't. So this makes her more similar to Sage, right? Well, not really, because Sage has slow orbs and a wall that can't be seen through. Deadlock only has a net that makes people crouch and it can be removed almost instantly. And her wall is almost like Sage's wall but worse, since it can be seen through. And if you don't want to be shot or seen through her wall, you'd have to waste valuable utility from controllers to stop that from happening. Not to mention, Sage can heal and resurrect teammates. On the other hand, Deadlock only has an ult that might have a chance to guarantee a kill on one singular enemy. This makes every single other Sentinel outshine Deadlock in so many factors, which is why I think she was never picked in VCT Champions. She has the potential, but it's just not enough to convince anybody to play her over the other Sentinels. The only thing that stands out would be her ult, but that too is outclassed by the other Sentinels. Killjoy's ult can take or deny an entire site. Cypher's ult can review where the entire team is twice. Chamber's ult, when used correctly, is a free operator that can get more than one kill as opposed to Deadlock's ult. All these ultimates could discourage or stop any movement from the enemy. But for Deadlock, her ultimate is just trapping one enemy and very slowly reeling them into their death. And that can be stopped by just merely shooting at it. Which leads to another point, it's that all the other Sentinel ultimates are hard to get rid of. Killjoy's ult requires some form of utility or a dangerous push into enemy territory to destroy. Cypher's ult is literally unstoppable once it's used and cannot be prevented, and stopping Chamber's ult requires you to kill the man himself, which is usually a death sentence depending on the situation. The answer would be yes. Riot could definitely buff something about her. The best place to start would be to buff or make changes to her graph net, as it is extremely useless as of right now. Maybe giving her 2 of them instead of 1, or even increasing the time it takes to get rid of her net to a solid 2 to 3 seconds would help a lot. Next up are her sonic sensors, which are actually fine, since it adds something new to the game. That being a sentinel that watches areas that enemies usually go fast or make sound in. The only thing that should be changed is making them retrievable and redeployable. On to our next piece of utility, which is our wall. I think the wall, in my opinion, doesn't need any buffs or changes. It's already stronger than a Sage wall in terms of durability, and it being able to be shot through is a double-edged sword, which is a fair fight for both the defending and attacking sides. Lastly, her ultimate. Her ultimate feels strong, yet weak at the same time. Its ability to just snatch one singular enemy away makes 1v1 situations easily winnable, but when it comes to using it against more than 2 people in general, it can be easily stopped if the opposing team knows what they're doing and are coordinated enough to shoot at it. However, the ultimate's cocoon is pretty tanky, and its 600 HP can take around half a mag of a rifle to destroy, which is around 15 to 18 shots from a Vandal or a Phantom, depending on what rifle you're using. So, in order to be fair to the opposing team, I think that the only thing that should be changed here would be to increase the reeling speed of her ultimate. That way, the enemy has to react to it in time before it's too late. At the end of the day, while Deadlock may not be useless and has potential, her current state leaves a lot to be desired. There may be areas where she may or may not be stronger than the other Sentinels, but it is overshadowed by her weaknesses and underwhelming utility in general. Riot will have some work to do if they are to buff Deadlock and improve her as an agent, and hopefully, one day, Deadlock will see the light of day in the next VCT Champions.